In 480 BC, the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen crossed from Asia into Europe. Modern estimates put it at somewhere between 120,000 and 300,000 soldiers, backed by a navy of over 600 warships. They were coming for Greece. The empire behind this army controlled roughly 50 million people, nearly half the world's population at the time. It stretched from Egypt to India. Its king, Xerxes, had spent 4 years preparing for this single campaign, building a bridge of boats across the Hellespont and carving a canal through an entire mountain peninsula so his fleet wouldn't have to sail around it. The city that would lead the defense against this force had a total citizen population of about 8,000 men. No massive treasury, no navy, no walls, just soldiers. That city was Sparta, and what happened over the next year and a half would determine whether Western civilization survived its first real test. To understand why Sparta was different from every other city in Greece, you have to understand what they did to their children. At age 7, every Spartan boy was taken from his family and entered into the Agog, a state-run training program that was less of a school and more of a survival gauntlet. They were given 1 cloak per year, fed barely enough to avoid starvation, and encouraged to steal food to supplement their rations. If they were caught stealing, they weren't punished for the theft. They were punished for getting caught. By adulthood, a Spartan male was a professional soldier in every sense. They trained constantly. They fought in a tight formation called the phalanx, locking their shields together to form a wall and driving forward with 18-foot spears. While other Greek cities had citizen militias made up of farmers and tradesmen who fought when needed, Sparta had a standing army of full-time warriors. It was the only Greek city-state where being a soldier wasn't something you did alongside your real job. It was the job. But Sparta only had about 8,000 of these soldiers, and the Persian Empire had just assembled the largest army anyone had ever seen. The first clash came at a narrow coastal pass in central Greece called Thermopylae, which translates to the Hot Gates. King Leonidas of Sparta marched north with just 300 Spartans and about 7,000 allied Greek soldiers to hold the pass. The plan wasn't to win. It was to buy time for the rest of Greece to organize. The pass was narrow enough that the Persians couldn't bring their overwhelming numbers to bear. For 2 full days, Leonidas and his men held the line, fighting wave after wave of Persian infantry in close quarters, where Spartan training and heavy bronze armor gave them a brutal advantage. Xerxes reportedly sent his elite soldiers, the Immortals, a force of 10,000 hand-picked warriors, and even they couldn't break through. Then, a local farmer named Ephialtes betrayed the Greeks by showing the Persians a mountain path that led behind the defensive line. When Leonidas learned he was about to be surrounded, he dismissed the majority of the Greek army and stayed behind with his 300 Spartans, along with roughly 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans who refused to leave. They fought to the last man. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, when their spears shattered, they fought with swords. When their swords broke, they fought with their hands and teeth. Every single one of them died. But those 3 days changed everything. The sacrifice at Thermopylae did exactly what it was supposed to do. It slowed the Persian advance long enough for Athens to evacuate its civilian population and for the Greek navy to reposition. And it sent a message across the Greek world that someone was willing to stand and fight rather than submit. The next battle was at sea. The Greek fleet, led primarily by Athens, lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits of Salamis in September 480 BC. The Persians had more ships, but the strait was so tight that their numerical advantage became a liability. Greek triremes rammed and sank Persian vessels in close quarters, while the larger Persian fleet couldn't maneuver. The Persians lost roughly 300 ships. The Greeks lost about 40. Xerxes, who had been watching from a throne on the shore, reportedly witnessed the destruction of his naval superiority in a single afternoon. With his fleet crippled and his supply lines threatened, Xerxes retreated back to Persia with a portion of his army, leaving behind his general Mardonius with a still formidable land force estimated at around 70,000 to 120,000 soldiers. We dig into stories like this every week. If that sounds good, subscribe. The final confrontation came in August 479 BC at the plains of Plataea. Sparta led a coalition of roughly 40,000 Greek hoplites against Mardonius and his remaining Persian forces. The Spartans fielded 5,000 of their own citizen soldiers, plus 5,000 Helot light troops. They were the tip of the spear. The battle was chaotic. Both sides feinted and repositioned for days before the main engagement. When fighting finally broke out, the Spartans and the Persians met head-on. And this is where the difference in military systems became decisive. The Persian infantry, many of whom were lightly armed conscripts from across the empire, couldn't penetrate the Spartan phalanx. The interlocking shields, the heavy bronze armor, and the discipline drilled into every Spartan from childhood created a formation that the Persians simply could not break. Mardonius was killed in the fighting. When the Persian soldiers saw their commander fall, the army collapsed. The rout was total. Tens of thousands of Persian soldiers were killed in the battle and the pursuit that followed. Plataea ended the Persian invasion of Greece permanently. On the same day, according to tradition, the Greek fleet destroyed the remnants of the Persian navy at the Battle of Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor. The combined Greek victories at Salamis, Plataea, and Mycale broke the back of Persian military ambitions in Europe. A city of 8,000 citizens leading a loose alliance of fractious, often hostile Greek city-states had defeated the largest empire on earth. Think about the math for a second. The Achaemenid Empire had more people, more money, more ships, more soldiers, and more territory than any political entity that had ever existed. They had conquered Babylon, Egypt, and most of Central Asia. And they were stopped by a collection of tiny city-states on a rocky peninsula in the eastern Mediterranean, led by a city whose entire male citizen population could fit inside a modern sports arena. The victory didn't make the Greeks friends. Within 50 years, Athens and Sparta were at each other's throats in the Peloponnesian War, a devastating conflict that would drag on for 27 years and ultimately weaken all of Greece. Sparta won that war too, but at a cost it never recovered from. By 371 BC, Sparta's citizen population had declined so far that it was defeated by Thebes at the Battle of Leuctra and never again held a dominant position in Greek politics. But the Greco-Persian Wars had already done something that couldn't be undone. They had proven that a small, disciplined force fighting for its own land could beat a sprawling empire fighting far from home. They had preserved the Greek experiment in self-governance, philosophy, and democracy long enough for those ideas to take root. And those ideas eventually became the foundation of Western civilization. Every concept of individual rights, democratic government, and rule of law that exists in the modern world traces some part of its lineage back to what survived because Sparta and its allies refused to kneel. If you want to see how another small force humiliated a massive empire, that video is on screen now. Click it.